going to be talking about why I came out and why I came out at the young age of 16. For a little context, I grew up in Southern California in the 2000s, basically. I was born in the 1990s and had my coming of age and coming out in the late 2000s, early 2010s. So contextually, growing up as a teenager, this might have been one of the first times in history that I had a chance to just be queer. It wasn't going to be an easy road, but I could take it. I think as a general culture, we had moved a lot from where we were, let's say, in the 1980s even. And I felt a sense that I could do it. I could come out. I was terrified, though. I knew that coming out would, one, expose me to a lot of hate. And two, I knew that if I came out and I didn't have everything go well, I might be a little bit on my own. But it just got to the point that it felt like I had to come out. So yeah, I think one of the ways that you might know that you're close to being able to come out is if you start to feel the sense of urgency, the sense that we can't just stay here any longer. There's never going to be a perfect time to come out. There's never going to be a time when you feel 100% confident. But I do think for most of us who have come out, there is a time where you feel, even if things don't go how I want them to, the importance of living earnestly, of living authentically, of being myself is more important than some of those hardships that I might endure. I do want to caveat here, just for those, especially younger viewers who might really be in a vulnerable state, do not feel the need to come out if it's going to jeopardize things like housing, like your university tuition, food, physical safety. If you have any real reason to believe that those might be in jeopardy, really try to get in a more secure position before you come out, because the last thing that I would suggest to a young person is to put a more ideological concern like everyone should come out ahead of their own material needs. So I always knew I was gay since really as long as I can consciously remember. I think if I had to give it an age, I probably knew around 5, but it goes back deeper for me. It goes back longer. I have memories that are faint, but still, those kind of flickering memories from when you're 2, 3, 4. I was in the room of my babysitter who was like a teenage girl in the 90s, and she was listening to the Backstreet Boys, and we look at the CDs, and I thought, even as like a 3 or 4-year-old, I thought like one of the guys was cute or like attractive, not like in a sexual sense, because obviously you don't really have a concept of that, but just like in a, I want to be around them, I find them very like nice to look at sort of way. I definitely have these attractions to men that go way beyond just a sexual feeling towards men, and they've gone back as far as I can remember. And what really started to become apparent to me growing up as I got a little bit older was that I was different than the other boys, which I know is kind of a cliche in coming out stories at this point, but I think it's a universal or nearly universal experience for a lot of queer men. There are two sides that they need to come out about to themselves. There's one side, which is I'm attracted sexually to men. And there's another side that is usually earlier than the attraction to men, which is a realization or a feeling that I am different than other men. And a lot of times for queer men, that can be because of gender non-conforming behavior when they're a child. For me, like, I like to play with Barbies. I also like to play with like Hot Wheels and trains, but I also like to play with Barbies. And like my dad held a whole concern about this and, had a big issue with it growing up. And it kind of instilled this kind of sense that I can't be exactly who I am. I can be parts of who I am, but I can't be 100% of who I am. And that's kind of how I grew up, feeling like, like I could be me, but only to an extent. I could show some interests, but not all of my interests. If I liked a dress or a fashion show, I knew like almost instinctually that's not good. And I felt all the whole time in my childhood like I was never boy enough. Even though it's interesting now, like I'm not particularly femme. Like, yeah, like my voice sounds kind of gay, like obviously, and I have some interests like, pop music and RuPaul's Drag Race that are more stereotypically feminine, but I'm not someone who like expresses themselves, at least in terms of clothing, in a very feminine way. I'm not super involved in things like makeup, nail polish, any of that. Like those are just not the way that I like to present in the world. I'm always really jealous of those who are like super confident in themselves and can express themselves more freely than I can. I feel a little bit boxed in even at 30, but I guess I've settled on my presentation today feels the most safe and the most comfortable for me. But I'm digressing a lot. So growing up, I was kind of like a little gay kid, basically. But I got good at disguising my gay side and got a little better at being like the other boys, at least to some passable extent. And I kind of try to just lay low a lot of the times, especially with regards to anything feminine about me. I put myself more focused into studies because that was a little safer of an arena for me as a not very athletic, not very, I guess, violent or aggressive sort of kid. Fast forward a little bit into my middle school years, and at that point in my life, I started to become quite aware of my sexual attraction to men. And this was really stressful for me. And it was clear to me I was starting to develop crushes on guys, but I still at least could convince myself that I had crushes on girls too, because they're girls that I liked to talk to and that I thought were pretty. But when middle school started happening and, puberty started happening, it started to become more apparent that the way that guys felt about other girls was exactly the way that I felt about other guys. And I definitely was not starting to feel that way about girls. And so that became very, I guess, alarming for me, because this made me confront the fact that I might just be gay. And I didn't really have an idea about bisexuality fully at that time. But I thought, well, I'm young. Maybe things will get a little different as I age. I did come out to a few select friends of mine at the time, and it's funny looking back, one of the very, very first human being that I ever came out to ended up being a lesbian. And I think the whole reason why I decided that this person was safe to come out to was basically we both sensed in each other that we were kind of different. She didn't come out to me in return at the time, but she came out a few years later. It's kind of interesting how queers always find each other. Anyway, so I came out to her and a couple other friends who I felt safe, who weren't gonna like blab around the whole school. After I did that, those friends kind of left because they were like in a grade later than me, so they went to high school before I did. I was kind of on my own. I came to this idea of, well, I might not be bi, but maybe I'm bi. And if there's any chance that I'm bi, I need to make sure that I'm bi, because I don't want to be gay. It's going to be too hard. I did like a full 180 from being like a 13 or 14-year-old who could confidently come out to his friends to a kid who went like the opposite way in the closet, decided I'm going to start going to like church youth groups, trying to be like more Christian, trying to be more normative in every way that I can, and trying to be more masculine, I guess. I kind of went from maybe I could be a little gay to I'm probably bi, and I really want to make sure that I'm bi, and definitely want to make sure that I end up with a woman, so let's do everything I can to be like the other guys, all within like a year. So middle school is a hot mess for me. I really hated it. I think a lot of queer people have that experience in middle school. That definitely was mine. But the experience of just hating it and being not sure of yourself and made to feel awful all the time. And so I think it was a coping strategy of just like the horrors of middle school. So then I got into high school, and that's when I started to come to the idea that, okay, this whole facade about being bi probably isn't true. I came out to another close friend of mine that I knew from childhood, and he ended up being gay, which is very funny. At the time, he told me he was bi, and so that was kind of like such a relief. It's like, oh, you're bi. I think I'm actually gay, but I'm bi. So I was able to kind of explore my identity with him, not like in a physical sense. We never actually hooked up or anything, but just explore being bi, being gay. What am I? I guess trying to find my label with him. He was like a really good safe space for me to do that. So I'm really thankful I had that in my development. By my sophomore year or so, I became pretty sure, okay, I'm just gay, I'm not bi. For me, it was like this existential sort of question, like, who am I? What am I? Can I confidently just be bi? Can I hopefully be bi so I can find a woman when I'm older? Will I be able to have kids? Like, all these questions wrapped up around, being bi were kind of put to bed. I had my first like high school boyfriend for a little bit. I had just started to hook up with other guys, and I was pretty sure, okay, this is fun. I like this. This is who I am. Now, what does that mean for me? Let's figure that out later, but at least I can just privately come out to myself. And I think that's the first step in any coming out, is just privately coming out to yourself. And that was when I was, I guess, 14, 15 or so. I did that for a little bit, but then I just basically felt like I'm kind of living this lie to so many people, because like it's not like every day someone was asking me my thoughts on girls or anything like that, but it was starting to become, I guess, a question in the air, probably because a lot of these people knew that I'm not straight. And so I think to some extent they might be trying to get that out of me a little bit. I kind of just got sick of lying about it all the time. And I got sick not just of like lying about the instances, like the specific questions, but about the facade that I had to wear all the time around everyone. It became very exhausting. A lot of the reason I came out, honestly, is I started a Tumblr blog in 2011, and that introduced me to so many queer people globally that it normalized being queer for me, to the point where I felt like this isn't something shameful. This isn't something that I have to hide anymore. Even if these people in my small town or small-minded town don't appreciate me, there are like people globally who I will be able to connect with later on in life who will support me. And that was the right intuition. Honestly, that's how I feel now. Like, I'm so supported by people who are a lot more open-minded than the people who I grew up with. Like, the town environment that I grew up in was very closed-minded. I always felt like this like odd, kind of the odd one out. And I had this intuition, especially after like becoming moderately popular on Tumblr myself, that other people are going to support me, whether or not like people in this town support me, people at my high school support me. So I got to that point where I couldn't lie to my parents anymore. I felt like I had a chance of support later on in life, even if things didn't go very well. And so I thought to myself, okay, I'm just going to do it because I'm tired of living this lie. It's what I need to do to get to the next step in my life. I didn't know what the next step in my life was, but I knew it wasn't being in the closet anymore. I knew it wasn't pretending to be straight. I really wanted to find a boyfriend too, and I knew it was going to be really difficult to do that if I was not out. With the progress that had happened in the late 2000s with regards to society's acceptance of particularly gay men, I felt that I can do this reasonably as a 16-year-old. And this was like the first time that really a 16-year-old could reasonably come out and expect some level of support from their peers and from their parents. I think if I had been in the 1990s in high school, it would have been a lot more difficult. Even the 2000s would have been fairly difficult. I came out in 2011. I think 2011 was the year to do it. It was the year of Lady Gaga's Born This Way. It was the year of We Are Who We Are, Firework, all these like pseudo coming out, yay gay anthems being #1 hits on the charts. It was the year of things like Glee and I guess the mainstreamification of a lot of like queer identity. This is like when gay people kind of had their little moment in society, and I felt like, okay, these actors are coming out. Like Lance Bass had come out. Well, he's not an actor, but you know what I mean. I think Neil Patrick Harris had come out. There was kind of this rise of more out and proud people in the world, and I felt like, you know what, I could be one of them. I'm young, but I could definitely be one of them, and I'm so thankful that I did it. My mom was really sweet when I did come out, and she knew, obviously, well, not obviously, but she said she knew that I was gay for a long time, probably always, but wanted to allow me time to come out on my own terms. And I really was thankful for that, because she didn't, unlike a lot of other adults in my life, she didn't bombard me with questions about who I was dating that much, or make me feel super uncomfortable about girls or anything like that. I think she just gave me the space, and I'm so thankful for that she gave me that space to just be in the closet without yanking me out of it, I guess. My mom also told me that she, like, even though she knew, she just felt like it wasn't her decision to make when I came out. And I wish more queer kids had that extension of support and space. My mom actually even asked me maybe a year or two before I was ready to come out. She basically just said one day when we were watching, I think we were watching Ellen, which I know she's problematic and canceled now, but like it was something that my mom and I like to do. And we were watching it, and she kind of, like, there was something gay related, so it wasn't just completely out of the blue. But she just turned to me and said, like, you know, if you were gay, I would still love you. I think that was her way of just saying, like, I know you're gay and I still love you. But just the way that she phrased it at the time of, like, this more hypothetical was so, like, lovely. And I wish more queer kids got that message. I think that really was a huge part of me coming out. It's actually my mom, actually, now that I think about it. I didn't know that when I was making this, but she really was a huge part of why I was able to come out so young. It's just knowing that she did love me. And then my dad was a little bit more traditional. Like, he's not super conservative or anything like that, but he just has more traditional ideas about, like, masculinity. And so I was always more worried about him, but I knew with my mom's support, at least, that, like, we would be able to make it through as a family. So she came out for me, which I wasn't super pleased with, but basically she felt like she couldn't keep it a secret, which I give her forgiveness now. I wasn't pleased with at the time, but I was actually really scared to come out to him. I just didn't want to see kind of like the reaction of disappointment. So she kind of made it a little bit easier for me in that way too, even though it wasn't really consensual. Like, it just is how it happens. That ended up being okay. My dad was quiet for about 2 weeks or so. Not angry, not mean, just quiet. We didn't talk at all. So it was kind of awkward in the house. And then eventually one day I was watching TV. He came up to me. And this was the part that was kind of negative. And I don't know how much I want to share this, just because, like, I feel like it paints him in maybe not the best light. But I guess I'm going to be real here. He basically came to me concerned that I would get AIDS, and came to me concerned that I wasn't sure. Like, I was too young to know this for sure. It was too big of a decision for a teenager to make. So I had to do, like, a lot of on-the-spot educating. I combated the AIDS thing fairly quickly just by saying something along the lines of, like, AIDS is obviously something I'm concerned about too. I'm not sexually active, for one, and for two, straight people can get AIDS too, so, like, I'm just going to be safe. And, like, there's not really much more to discuss about that. That's not going to change things of, like, who you find attractive. Like, it's a risk, but... And I told him this, I'm like, it's not like what it was in the 80s when you were growing up. And although it was still, like, a big deal in 2011, 2012 or so, obviously medicine had advanced by that point. You know, I think my dad had very outdated views of what an AIDS diagnosis meant, or what an HIV diagnosis meant. Although it's obviously something that causes a lot of stress, there's still tons of stigma about it. It wasn't top of mind. I guess it was really weird for an adult to be like, to just, like, assume that I'm going to just get AIDS by virtue of the fact of being gay was kind of like a really... yucky sort of thing. But we've since moved on from that, and, like, we're in a good place now. The other thing about, like, knowing if I was gay or not, like, being too young to know that was easy to combat too, because I basically flipped it around on him and just said, so you were a teenage boy once, right? So when you were, like, 15 or 16, were you unsure if you liked boys or if you liked girls? He said no. And I was like, so, like, by that point, you were pretty clear, right? Like, sexually, what was interesting to you? And he's like, yeah. I was like, well, that's exactly how I feel, but just about the other gender. Like, people know who they are younger than you think. Like, you have sexual desire younger than when you were 18. Like, you know, as a teenage boy, what you're into for the most part. You might, for those who are bi, might have interest in both genders, or for those who are questioning, might have some curiosity. But for the most part, I would say 90% of guys know more or less they're mostly into women or they're mostly into men. At that point, you know, he kind of, I wouldn't say fully accepted me, but he accepted the fact that I was gay. Like, that wasn't up for debate, and that was good. That was the first path to really building a relationship with his gay son. And so for the final part of this little coming out story, I came out to my school mostly by coming out to my closest friends first, and then some more peripheral friends second. And then once I told all the people that I felt like should know just face to face, I decided, okay, let's just make a Facebook status and get it over with. And I remember just feeling so relieved. This is also back in the time when Facebook was like a relevant social media. You could log on after school and see like 200 friends like online commenting, you know, sharing, liking, whatever it was that we were doing. And so it was like a really active, exciting thing to do, to like post it in such a public forum and get a lot of great feedback. The people I was surrounding myself with were good people, and they supported me. And then those who like didn't support me seemed to kind of fall out. So at that point, I was like an out teenager. Like, I was a 16-year-old out kid in the year 2011. That's really where I started my journey as a out queer person. That's kind of how I conceptualized myself as me. That's like where I started to be me for the first time in the world. I wasn't hiding the basics of me anymore. On a like deep psychological level, I felt like I was me, and I could start doing things in the world. I could find someone to love. I could set career goals for myself. I could envision a future for me where I was a full person and integrated into a community and had a supportive family and wasn't this outcast that I feared that I would be. Obviously, there's so much to unpack with all of that, but it was such a relief. Honestly, coming out was one of the best things I ever did. I'm really thankful it went positively. A lot of people, it doesn't go 100% as great as it went for me. And for those people, obviously, like, you know, we need to continue to support them. We need to make sure that there are resources available for those facing homelessness in the queer community. We need to make sure that queer youth have hotlines to be able to speak. They have supportive counselors and supportive adults in their lives. All of those things are important, and my story isn't meant to take away from that and to say that in 2011 things were great for queer people, because I had my fair share of homophobia thrown my way even after coming out. But all in all, it was a great experience for me. So hopefully, if you've made it to the end of the video, you kind of care about this topic and might have some juices flowing yourself. So in the comments, if you want to talk about your coming out journey, if anything that I said resonated with you, like, I would love to hear, like, if you grew up in the 80s, how was the high school experience for you? If you grew up in the late, 2000s, early 2010s, like I did, how was your high school experience? And if you're growing up now in high school, how was that? Like, that's really interesting to me. Anyways, thanks so much for listening. I will see you on the next video. Bye.